So, to start with, this is very much a facilitated discussion. So, what I suggest, if you want, that is, of course, move a bit central so we can have a kind of conversation across tables. But before we get started, we've got a few things we can just help you start the thought process. So, first of all, my name is Henrik Brogger. I'm the Director for Digital Operations and Service Delivery at the University of Reading.
I'm Stella, Poole, Head of Core Systems at the University of Birmingham.
And I think there are some slides coming up. There we go. Right, we've done introductions. So to start thinking a little bit about a sustainable and smart campus, we've tried to pick up on, first of all, a couple of definitions. So what is digital sustainability? It's about using digital technologies in a way that has a positive impact on the environment, on our society, and on our economies. And when you look at Smart Campus, it's about enhancing the education we offer, operational efficiencies, and also how we can intelligently apply our digital technologies. So some examples of that I sort of threw in. One thing we talk about when we talk about sustainability is quite often we've referenced the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You've got an element like smart security. So that's a concept that I know anyone who's been involved with doing a smart campus networks, for instance, has been involved with. Think about stakeholder participation. So I came across that when you start looking at smart campus, who do we talk to when we think smart? It's not all about the technology. The outputs and outcomes that are driven through that can be manifold, and they can come from many different angles. So are we talking to all our stakeholders when we are really thinking about developing smart campus? The personalization of the experience is another close thing to that. So again, are we having those conversations with our students? What smart campus really mean to them? And how can that then be sustainable when we look at the green technologies we can put in? So hopefully that's start letting you think a little bit more about what that is. I thought I'd put these 17 sustainable development goals up. Again, actually for the first question, and that will be over to you. What do you feel is right to do when we talk about a sustainable campus? Are we right in referencing these 17 goals? Is that the right way to go about it? Or are there other ways of measuring, other things we should be thinking about when we're thinking about a sustainable and smart campus?
Henrik, I think it would be good if we go down.
We're going to step down.
Because it's an interactive session.
Yes. So we're joining you now. So anyone got any? Go on.
When you say talk about,
yeah.
do you mean, sorry, I don't know yourself. When you say talk about, who do you mean talk to? Because I think you could quickly lose an audience with 17 things. I've got to about 4. So I don't think it's going to be very engaging unless you want to go talking in depth with people who care about sustainability. So it depends on your audience, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Yeah, absolutely does. And I think that's part of we've got another one over there. That's part of that conversation about, are we engaging with the right stakeholders in trying to develop a smart and sustainable campus? Very good point.
And just to add to that, I think it has a lot to do with plain English. So how do we communicate effectively with our stakeholders to ensure that they understand what we're trying to achieve?
Hi, you're going to probably get fed up of hearing from me. So we have started that journey of, I'm from UCL as well, and I work with Lloyd, and we cherry-picked 3 of those out of there to see, and we pull it out to the whole of the portfolio, so everybody in the team, to say we have a responsibility to go on this journey to help UCL and help the UK and help the world realise their sustainability goals, which are the 3 that we'd want to pick on, and how do we progress that. So believe it or not, Life Below Water didn't factor very high in that, but other ones like decent work for economical growth was important. I think there's one, I don't know if I can see it in there, but one for younger people in the workplace, helping younger people. So, and I can't remember what the third one is, but yeah, it's I think a way to go about.
I mean, you've got things like decent work and economic growth, and I think
that's definitely one that we got.
That element you've got younger people in. There was another one that came out to me. I mean, reducing inequalities. Again, that's at the core of a lot of the education we're doing. Is about reducing inequalities in society.
I think as well what's important is to not drive it as a work stream, so to speak, on its own, but embed it in everything that's done. Everything that in the day-to-day roles that they have that as their responsibility. So a member in our team went out and off her own back and spoke to one of our suppliers and said, whenever you do an installation, the amount of rubbish that is generated through packaging, what can you do about that? Because that isn't sustainable, and us as an organisation, to not mention that, is not responsible. So empowering people to have them conversations, I think, is really good.
Yeah, no, good. Really good point. We got another one? Just to add to that conversation, one thing, and that was on the back of the previous conversation that came up, is so to be properly smart, we generate a lot of data. I think that was very clear from what John was saying. That data has to be stored somewhere. That's got a cost. We might apply AI, edge AI, or whatever you do to it. You apply that. That's got a cost to it as well. How does that, the cost of that data storage, that AI application, how does that compare with what we're trying to achieve in terms of sustainability? I know that might be a conundrum because I think we would all love to generate that data and see the outcomes, but if we've also got to think about the cost, the emissions of that storage, that AI application. I don't know how. Go on, we got a microphone. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I suspect I'm massively out of my depth here, but doing AI processes today is expensive in terms of cost and energy. It feels to me like we're probably on a journey that says in 2 or 3 years' time that might not look quite so expensive. Who knows what's going to fix it around? But most technologies that start at this point look expensive and not optimized. And if they're adopted, they become optimized quite quickly because of market forces.
Yeah.
So if you fix that problem too hard now, you might be fixing a problem that isn't a problem quite soon. Just guesses.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Oh, that's a question down here, actually. As you're going down there, one of the things I thought we could do, and this is from a technology perspective, we could start to filter the data, and we could be more sensible about the data we capture, and that probably requires some thought. Anyway.
I mean, I think the simple answer to that is we need to do the sums. Yeah. So we.
Very true.
That's grossly oversimplifying it because actually we haven't got enough information for the whole supply chain. But in the end, it has to be, is the cost of storing the data and doing whatever calculations you do more than you are saving or less in terms of impact? And I think that, there's some interesting research in that gives us a guide to it. It's certainly not easy to unpick, but I don't think we should shy away from the fact that doing compute on data can be beneficial, but we have to understand whether it is or not.
Totally agree, and I think we are still trying to understand how to effectively measure what we do around sustainability and AI, because AI generates a lot of carbon footprint. It's still green, so we are still in that process, and there's still a lot to do to ensure that there is that benefit realization in utilizing AI and being sustainable as well.
Can I just add one other bit to that, in that I think that when we're measuring this, quite often 2 different aspects of AI get confused. The training and the inference, which is the AI actually running. Inference costs are coming down all the time. That's probably not where the major cost is. It's in the model training. And I think that we shouldn't get large language model training confused with small training that can predict something on your campus that probably doesn't cost a lot more than a bit of Excel in reality in terms of running. So, you know, not everything's equal in it, and it's good to get into the detail.
And I think I'm picking on that point, which I think is really good. Do we feel there's a lack of knowledge is there a knowledge gap we need to bridge when we talk about both smart campus and how smart is smart campus really, but also how green are the technologies we're putting in really, in that sense? Do we feel that there's a gap, and how can we sensibly bridge that gap? Anyone got any thoughts, ideas of how to do that, or anything you may have done within your work where you've tried to move towards that? Thoughts on that? Anyone? So I'm thinking, again, what Stella was talking about in terms of we obviously need to measure how sustainable we are. That's very much a beginning journey. But we also need to measure, well, how do we measure smart campus? How smart is a smart campus? Has anyone put a peg in the ground and said, that's the ultimate smart campus?
Hi, Mark Perrett. I'm with PTS, with Smart Campus Consultants. Doesn't it depend on what you define a smart campus to be? And I know it's a really simple thing to say, but there's no point measuring. So, yeah, if it's the sustainability angle, there are a whole list of things that you could measure, and then there's the cost of measuring it and the relative merits of the different things. So I could give a glib answer and say, you know, your measurement is energy use, and you understand energy use based on occupancy, and you understand occupancy based on sensor technology. But it's horses for courses. It's, you know, it's what facet of smart. That's the big, I think the overarching challenge is it's a buzzword that we've all readily latched onto without ever demystifying what it is. And I think just to give the simplistic statement of, and I know you've said it for a reason to get the question up, but to say, what is a smart campus, what's the yardstick on it? It's like, well, you're going to get different measurements for different things. It's like, and the institutions just need to decide for themselves, what are we measuring? What do we define as sustainability? How can smart, in all its guises, help with that? And from that will come the different ways of measuring it.
I think that's a really good point, actually. That idea of relativity is that it's different to you and I, and it's okay it's different to you and I, as you say. It may be just about emissions, and that's probably a good place to start, and then we can move on to different ways of measuring the smart campus. Does anyone have any examples of how they've done smart campus or an element of smart campus where they felt that was useful in their organisation, and how you measured that? Or perhaps the other way around, where you've done sustainable campus and you've measured that kind of impact. Is anyone looking at areas like that? I certainly know from a Reading perspective, we're using, and I've heard a fair bit about that here today, around using the network and Bluetooth beacons to pick up movement, people in spaces. That's definitely a way of becoming more sustainable in the use of space. So it's back to what we saw on the previous slide about operational efficiencies a lot. We're picking up on those. Are there other organisations that are looking at that? Looking at trying to explore that more? Anything? I think that idea of having 7,000 sensors, there's got to be at least a handful of those that can help us and can really focus on that sustainability element. I was thinking we've got
Kingston University, Steve Watson. We don't have any solutions because we're quite early on our journey, but I'm just interested to hear what you were saying about using the Bluetooth beacons, because it's a conundrum that we do have, and we've got, as I'm sure a few of you have, we use seats for our student engagement, and we've got lots of Bluetooth beacons that are battery fed and not very sustainable, and eventually are all going to end up in landfill. So just be interested to hear what you've done at Reading.
Again, it's very much in the beginning of the journey for us as well, with seats, interestingly enough. I suppose that makes me think about, actually we've got a question over there, about the whole idea of looking at elements and materials and how we need to make sure we extract those in terms of from a sustainability and a recycling perspective. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to add to your previous question, really, is anybody doing anything along the topic that you were mentioning about occupancy analysis and that kind of thing? And we certainly are at University of Edinburgh. For a number of years, we've been looking at occupancy based on Wi-Fi devices connected to Wi-Fi, and that's been developing over time. So from that, we're able to understand broad usage of buildings and areas within buildings, and it's been interesting to see through pre-pandemic COVID lockdown and then the subsequent kind of gradual changes in behaviours associated with building occupation, but they are driving some of the thinking and analysis around which buildings do we really need to have open when, can we consider possibly reducing energy consumption in buildings on Fridays, for example, if those buildings are not being occupied very heavily on Fridays, which then allows you to carry that on through a Saturday and a Sunday, which then makes it possible to get some efficiency from turning heating down and turning it back up again for the start of the week. Whereas with a shorter time frame, for example, that's not as useful to do. So certainly we're very much involved in doing that. We don't currently use Bluetooth beacons, but we are looking at other types of sensors that we might deploy, and we have actually deployed in the past smart room sensors, which include things like CO2, temperature, humidity monitoring, to also understand more fine-grained information about usage of rooms, for example, because you can obviously track the CO2 level and identify when people are actually in that space, and compensate for things like people opening windows and stuff like that. It's certainly possible to do, and they're relatively cheap items to deploy. So yeah, just wanted to.
As long as they don't have a battery in them, that needs that.
Absolutely.
Needs to go into landfill.
This one.
I wanted to make a couple of points about data. Reflecting on the conversation from Imperial earlier, they were talking about one of their issues with their app was they had vast amounts of data that they already had, and it was difficult to process it and difficult to integrate it. And sometimes we're asked for more and more data, but the data is only of any use if we're going to do something about it. So the sort of smart campus stuff I'm interested in is where there's something immediate. So if you have a sensor that tells you the CO2 level is too high, and then that will open a window or switch on an air conditioning or some system or something and take an immediate action, and you've got that closed loop, great. But I'm not really interested in collecting lots of data for the sake of it when we've probably already got too much data, and we probably can't integrate it and do anything meaningful with it because it's just, we're drowning in it. So I can be a bit sceptical about some smart campus stuff because it sort of sounds intuitively like the right thing, but actually, unless we're going to do anything useful with it, why are we bothering?
Absolutely, and it costs more to store this data. The carbon footprint that data generates is one of the high factors to sustainability. So data itself is a huge source of sustainability issues. So why keep this data if we're not doing anything about them? Thank you.
Makes you think whether we need to have a data management plan for what we do in terms of smart campus and that data that's generated there, and think about it more intelligently. I think one of the things that came up when we talked about the room sensor component is, and again, I'm talking about a project we're doing at Reading with remodelling a whole old building. It's for the School of the Built Environment. And there's an element of sustainability in that because the students that are going to occupy that building, which we want to make smarter, I'm not going to say it's going to be the smartest building. It probably won't be because it's an old 1973 brutalist building. I don't think you could ever do that. But I think there's an element of sustainability in then bringing students in because they want to see how this works. So I think that there's so many angles you can attack when you start looking at smart. It's not necessarily just about, again, making sure we close and open windows and when we reduce and take the heating off when we need to. We've got to think, and I think that's probably where I'd throw back to the Sustainable Development Goals. There are lots of angles we can think about when we think about something being sustainable. It's not just about trees and it's not just about water. There are very many angles. Don't know whether anyone's had any thoughts about that. Are you bringing your stakeholders in? Are you bringing schools into the conversation when you talk about smart? Or is that very much an IT and estates conversation that happens in your organisations? And is that, again, is that right or wrong? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, hi. We actually work for a further education institution that does HE as well, so we've got a slightly different view with here. We've had sustainability built in as part of our corporate plan as of last year.
Okay.
So it's now identified as one of the 6 key pillars across the organisation. Making progress on that, however, has been very, very different. And we've attempted to form green committees and such like across our various sites. We've got 6 sites spread over a couple of counties. And it's amazing the difference that the student representation shows on top of the staff representation that would not have that as part of their day job. So we've opened it up to all staff to say, if you want to join, come and join. So if you're a lecturer in engineering, come and talk to us, because sustainability is not normally your thing. And it's quite diverse, the number of ideas and things that we have had coming out of those groups. Not much execution at the minute, but range of ideas has included things like there's an area of unkept sort of woodland and parkland next to one of our engineering campuses. We're trying to identify if it's council owned. If it is, do our students that are doing horticulture, for example, want to come and do something with it as part of a learning experience and improving the community and all that sort of piece as well. We've put things like smart power meters in to reduce energy and all that sort of stuff, but it's a bit of a different goal. And early on, the student data was showing us that they were more interested in recycling than anything else. It was about where's the bins and can we recycle? That was a constant theme across this 6 very diverse campuses.
Yeah. And is that any type of recycling?
Seemed to be.
Yeah.
It was general rubbish to start with, but then we started to get the questions about what do IT do, and you can quote re-regs and all the rest, but they actually wanted to know what it was going down, and actually that made me help my decision to decide to partner with somebody where we knew that they were trying to operate a zero waste to landfill policy for our electrical waste.
Yeah.
So at least we could support the students' view at that young age of 16 all the way through to 20 odd, which is what they're up to for BA, etc. To say that at least we're trying to do various bits and pieces. So we're getting lots of ideas, but we're just struggling with the execution at the minute.
Absolutely, but at least you're thinking about it, and I think the e-waste component, that being the fastest growing global waste stream, tackling that, it's interesting because is that part of Smart Camp or is it not? To me, it's a wide subject, and you can include many different aspects to that. Personally, I think it'd be great if we could do more recycling on that level, not just our corporate stuff, but also the letting people bring in things from home. I know there are regulatory issues with that we've got to think about, because we might become a waste processor in that sense. So there's lots of thoughts that can be had around that. Any other projects that are going on with Smart Campus that are taking different angles? I do like the idea of e-waste. Personally, I think that's something we have to really think about when we think about our the full life cycle of the equipment that we buy.
Yeah, I just want to share some of the discussions that we had in JISC around this with estates directors. So I was involved in a IoT Smart Campus project a few years ago, and so spoke to quite a lot of people about it. And one of the bits of feedback we got, I think we need to be quite careful about this, is so we were talking about sensors and the data that it could create. And time again we got the feedback, well actually I know all that, I know all these problems with my campus. Having given me a dashboard that shows this isn't going to change anything for me. I just haven't got the money to fix it. It's just going to give me more problems. So I think, you know, getting the right stakeholders in is really important to figure out actually what is possible. Particularly, you know, obviously it varies between campuses. These were people that had, you know, old buildings that were complicated. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that because it was quite an eye-opener. We kind of just assumed that having more data and giving actionable insights would be useful, but that didn't really turn out to be the case.
Thank you. I was reading something this morning, and I saw that by the end of this year, we will generate 18% more IoT devices. At the moment, we have about 4 billion. So that's quite a lot. So I think it's really important that when we talk about smart campus and, you know, AI and IoT, we really need to talk about sustainability and consider sustainability. And like my colleague here said, it's important to have the conversation with the right people, get everybody on board. It's not just IT and estate, it's everybody that should get on board to have these conversations. Because 4 billion IoT devices are, yeah, it's ridiculous at the moment.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think that speaks back to the fact we mentioned before about that idea of personalising the experience. I think we quite often get that when we start talking about the student journey and how can we make a smart campus about the experience for the student. But we're all staff members. Don't we get a nice experience too? Is often what I add into that one, because I think we're so focused on that student journey, but I mean, you guys might have more. We've got 4,500 staff at Reading, and there's a staff retention question there as well as a student retention question, especially through these challenging times. So I think, again, invite that out to you guys. What do you feel about Smart Campus and the focus of Smart Campus? Do you primarily see that as something that's driven by estates and people wanting to get more students on board, or do you find that that's a broader topic? Have you heard of any projects where you might be targeting certain segments of stakeholders? Any thoughts on that? Any areas where you've explored different avenues to try and bring people on board? I think to me, the staffing one is interesting because it sometimes talks about pervasive Wi-Fi. Well, we know the students go out and they go various places, but as a staff member, I personally like the idea that I can go and sit and work anywhere on campus, even if it's outside. So I think that, to me, is where we've got to think about our colleagues. I think there's also, just to start wrapping up a little bit here, is there is a sense that we need to understand that balance between what we're achieving with a smart campus, but also how sustainable are those achievements. Actually, to me, it's not straightforward, and I think the mention before about what can smart campus be, I think it's a relative question. It's about the outputs and really making sure we define the outputs and the outcomes we're looking for. And then balancing that with a sustainable lens. And I like what was mentioned before about building sustainability into your plan. To me, I've often been asked, do I need to create a sustainability strategy? I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is to build sustainability into your strategies. So coming at it from a different angle. So to try and put that lens on everything that you do. And I would say that has got to be the way to look at Smart Campus as well. Get a sustainability lens on it, because I think that way you're going to be able to at least have that balanced discussion about what you can achieve with Smart Campus and driving those very worthwhile goals, but also making sure you can stand up and say, actually, that's also sustainable because of X, Y, Z, or we're making that trade-off, if that makes sense. Any final comments? Go on.
Sorry, I haven't probably formed this very well in my mind.
It's okay.
There's a word up there that's participation, a really important one, I think. And going back to the SDGs and some of the first boxes, forgotten what they are, which is really bad. Poverty was one of them. And but here we are. So some of those first ones, and I think participation is really important. I think the trouble with Smart Campus is it seems to become a bit of a bubble, but the scope's a bit woolly. And I kind of think that some of the most important things we do at the universities are about outreach and about the alumni community and a much broader life cycle than a Smart Campus really seems to suggest. It always feels a bit dangerous and a bit introspective. And I also just wonder whether there's a danger that it's a bit exclusive as well, because it's so based around digital. And lots of the people that I'm sure all of us are trying to encourage into our institutions, sometimes they don't actually have access to digital. It's taken for granted they do, but sometimes they don't. How do you reach them? And does Smart Campus just not get involved in any of that? How holistic is Smart Campus? That's my kind of question, which is probably a much bigger question than we could have right now. But
very perfect.
All of your points kind of make me think that. It make me feel a little bit anxious that it gets a bit insular. And clearly there are some fantastic things, solutions within Smart Campus that we have to strive towards. But a Smart Campus strategy on its own feels a bit, it's so broad. You'd have to put so much into it. What about all that other stuff with our finite resources that we need to pay attention to? So, sorry, it's kind of a question. Maybe we can catch up.
I think it's a very good, and it's a really great way to end this, I would say. Anyone else got anything that they want to add to that? Because I think, ultimately, I think all of us have probably been part of that, this idea that we need to look at Smart Campus, and it's a project, it's a drive, it's an initiative, it's something we have to plan for. Or, again, just like with sustainability, is it just something we have to think about in different verticals, where we need to make sure we can, again, pervasive Wi-Fi, we engage stakeholders in what we do on campus. Yes, we make sure we turn the heating off when everyone's left the room, all of those kind of things, but also making sure that the experience of being on campus and the optimization is happening through those verticals rather than as a pervasive, or perhaps it's part of both. Yeah. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
I really appreciate this. Hope it was a good